Hello, everybody, and thank you for listening to another episode of the No Fluff MSP Marketing Podcast. Today, I'm super excited. I've got a good friend of mine, Steve Young, on. Steve, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. I feel like this was a long time coming. Excited to
Yeah,
get this going.
I totally agree. It's long overdue. Little background, real quick, before we kind of dive in. I've known Steven for years. I've known Steven Young for years. He's been in our peer group when I was at Alltek. We had our own sales peer group for a while with me, Steve, Mike Harrington, Curtis, who's been on the podcast. So like we just had our own sales peer group. We kind of cheered each other on. What are our challenges? What are we learning? And so it helped me be a better salesperson because I focused on marketing for years, and to really be able to have those sales conversations was extremely helpful, which is why I always preach have a peer group. So yeah, Steve was in my peer group. He works at a company, GDS, that currently is in the peer group with Alltek still, and it's cool. And so he's developed some amazing things at his own role at GDS. And so I had him speak at ScaleCon. Was this when you were at ScaleCon, was this like the first time you were like really presenting to a
That
decent
was my that
group
was
of
my
people?
first time speaking in a room over 15 people for sure. Yeah.
Dude,
Never had done something like that.
and you would have never known because the feedback I got from your presentation that you were one of the best presenters,
I
right?
appreciate that.
And
Thank
obviously you
you.
have amazing content to cover. This is you're a true practitioner of what you're doing, but I got so much positive feedback, like who's Stephen Young? And obviously, people were hitting you up like crazy after the event,
Yeah.
like, hey, teach
Yeah.
me. I felt bad for you actually. I was like,
It
man, he's
was
gonna
awesome. No, it was great.
oh,
It was
okay.
great to hear from people and the positive responses because I mean, I've never done something like that. I'm glad it sounded great, but I was freaking out that first minute walking up on stage. So I'm glad that I could hide that from everybody and fool a couple people.
And it's great because like I know you and I know you've got such a strong personality. You're such a funny dude. Like I'll never forget the night we all had dinner in Vegas, and it was me and Steven, you, your dad, and your dad's girlfriend, and
Yeah.
I wasn't laugh. I couldn't stop laughing the entire night. Like literally, people were like, "How much
Yeah.
weed did Taller smoke?" I'm like, "I don't even smell. Like
Yeah.
I'm not. I promise I'm not high. This is just so funny. Like you guys
It
are
was
cracking us up." Me and Steven still talk about my Steven all the time. But anyway, my point in saying that is, I remember on stage the first 10 minutes you were kind of tense.
yeah.
You were delivering well, but you were a little tense because obviously
Mhm.
there's 200 people. It's your first time
Yeah,
doing it.
for sure.
But about 10 minutes into that 30-minute presentation, you started dropping the humor,
Yeah, yeah,
being
yeah.
more
Yeah.
yourself, and the whole thing just shifted. I'm like, he's in it. He hit the zone.
Finally,
And yeah,
finally he got, it was exactly like that though. And I was glad that I could get into a rhythm because I'm not typically someone that even rehearses that stuff. I like to kind of just dive in and do it and wing it, as some people would say. But I had a rough outline, so I'm glad that I didn't. I'm glad that I could let a little bit personality show and settle into it, and it turned out to be a really cool thing.
yeah, it was awesome. And so yeah, I mean that went well. I was like, Steven, let's get you on the podcast. Let's talk about what you're doing. Listeners are anxious to hear more about what's going on with you. So, as we dive in, Steve, you want to give a little background on kind of who you are,
Sure.
where you work, all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned it. I work for GDS. I'm the director of business development. We're an MSP out of Massachusetts and have a little bit of a presence on the West Coast as well. But I'll jump back to the story, not to jump back to ScaleCom, but that's really where my sales journey started. Was somewhere in 2018. I had came up in the business. I've been doing this at this point for over, I should say, at this point in time, right now in 2025, over 10 years, a decade. And so I started where a lot of people do in that technical space, level one. And as I just progressed, I just gravitated towards sales and I had built out a client success program. And I really enjoyed learning about the nuance of sales. And it just seemed to be something that I really, really wanted to dive into. But like anybody that starts in sales, that is a quick kick just right to the gut, and it is not easy, and you learn pretty quickly that you don't know anything and that you really need to dive in and soak up as much as you can. And so I picked up the phone, I started making dials, and this is probably in like 2018. And I just remember that first person that I get that was like, how did you get my number?
Yeah.
Why did you call me? Are you kidding me? My face was red. I was sweating. Like it
Yeah.
was the worst possible first couple of dials you could make in your career. And I swore it off. I was like, this is done. Cold calling's dead. It doesn't work anymore. It's an outdated practice. And now I'm managing a team of two callers at the moment, and we're looking to expand that. And we've developed some success with the closing side of it as well. And now we're just expanding and I would say very systematically just growing the team. And it's been so much fun. But I think back to the days of the peer group too, and just how little I knew, asking you and Curtis, like, how do you ask a question to, get to pain? And you're just like, it's so funny how basic it starts and how much it
Yeah.
evolves, especially over the past, 6 or 7 years. But that's really where it started for me. It was asking. Luckily, you guys let me in that peer group. I don't know why or who called in the favor, but let me in the peer group and let me ask my dumb questions and start to learn from there. So it was a good starting point.
Yeah, man, to see your trajectory is insane. So speaking of kind of evolving, there's a lot of challenges in sales, and obviously you, like me, had to not only go get the leads, you had to get to the point where you can close the leads and close it at an acceptable enough rate that the
Mhm.
owner doesn't say, I'm going to take over. Right.
Exactly.
There's like
Yeah.
this, it is funny. There's this threshold where it's like, you can't lose too many deals, or like you lose your closing position
Your
almost.
credibility almost. It's
Yeah.
like, can you really pull it off? For sure.
Yeah.
There's a pressure to it. And I'm
Yeah.
working, for those of you that don't know, I'm working in a family owned and operated business. So my pops, that bar is even higher. So we
Yeah.
gotta make sure we get the closes and we're doing it right. But it's funny you said that. Mine was actually in reverse. I learned, or I should say, I learned how to close decently well. Hindsight, I didn't know how to close at all, but that's always hindsight. But I was actually able to learn how to close and develop a process, and then I learned how to get leads in the door. So
Mm,
I actually did it backwards. So,
nice.
but it was a good foundation because I had more confidence and I could jump into the phone and actually have a little bit more in-depth conversation. So
Yeah.
advantage, but if I could do it all over, I would have started with getting leads in the door, like you said. That's really where the gold is.
Yeah. So what were some early challenges that you faced, either on the call side or the close side, where it's like, man, this just does not seem to be working? And then kind of what tweaks have you made to get them to work?
Yeah. Well, like anything, I was always so focused on my process. And so with closing and being an account executive, someone who needs to go out and get business, I was always focused on, well, I need to get them to a first call. I need to get them to an on-site. And I had this linear process of getting them from front to back. And I was so engulfed in my own process that I forgot that I don't close deals, that the buyer actually is the person that ultimately signs a piece of paper that closes the deal. So I
Mm,
was only thinking about it from my perspective. And when I made the shift of saying, how can I actually help these people and align my process and mold it to where they are in their process,
mm,
it was a complete switch. It was one of those moments where you're like, oh, as people sometimes do, I'm only thinking about myself and 50%, arguably less, of the sales process. And there's a whole other side and a psychology that I just had no idea about. So making that switch has been one of the biggest on the account executive side. But to the calling side, there's really no secret sauce to it. It's how you say something is far more important than what you're saying. But along the lines of how to successfully cold call, it's a constant game of make the call, roadblock, write down what that roadblock was, find a way to solve it, and then move on to the next roadblock.
yeah.
It's just a complete if then, like if this happens, then say this.
Mhm,
And the tough part, especially when you start training people, is developing that to individual styles of personality. So
mm,
how caller one says something is not going to be how caller two delivers it. And there's
mm,
personality traits that go along with that you have to be mindful of to be able to show people these are frameworks to work within. These aren't scripts. These aren't do this and the result will come. There needs to be a little bit of creativity within that framework. But
yeah.
those two things, I think when we were able to just map out the problems and then we were able to decide, or excuse me, gain enough knowledge to know like what are, um, what is the buyer's process and the things that we need to walk them through. Those two
Mhm.
things just on each side have been huge.
Yeah, that's gold, dude. And it's it's kind of funny. I quote this a lot, but like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
So good.
I mean, yeah, and that was written like I don't even like 80 years at this point ago,
Mhm.
and still, and it was like an epiphany at the time because people were like, oh, I should care about the other person and genuinely
Yeah.
listen to them, and they're gonna
Know
like
their
me
name.
more.
It's
Know their
like
name, like instead of
important.
talking about myself and how impressive I am and everything about me, if I focus on that person, it's going to break barriers and make them
Mhm.
like me authentically because I'm on being authentic. It was groundbreaking to the point that even today, people recommend it as the number one self help book you should start when you're in college and everywhere else. And when I
Absolutely.
think about marketing, every time we start a marketing campaign, we say, okay, where do we start? We don't think about what the hell we want to sell the customer. We don't think about like what widgets. We think about that customer.
Mhm.
What do they want? What are their actual pain points? How do we get their attention? Let's make this about them.
Mhm.
And it's so funny because you said this, I said this, and still it's a competitive differentiator for you to be able to do that, to think more about that person. You're walking them through that process versus
Mhm.
you placing them in a 17-step thing that you've got
Exactly.
ironed out, and they have to start from square one.
Yeah, because when you're pushing them into your process, you're just bulldozing them through a process. And
Yeah.
then you get to the final piece and they have 150 questions unanswered. You missed 5 of the different steps that people need to walk through to be able to actually make these decisions and be confident in that decision. And then you get to the end and somebody ghosts you.
Mhm.
And you get to the end and you don't get the answer you want, and you start to reverse engineer and look at it as, okay, where am I just missing? I'm missing something. And
Mhm.
then it's like, shout out to one of my mentors on the sales side of things, Jeff Newton, who is just brilliant in the MSP sales space. But
Mhm.
he, a padlock where it has the different numbers and you get all the numbers in the correct order and the padlock opens.
Mhm.
He refers to it as that and kind of compares it to that. And only when you've unlocked all those different specific combinations can you crack the code and actually get somebody to sign something.
Yeah.
And so skipping any of those steps or neglecting their side of the process is just a quick way to just lose deals, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. You're
Yeah.
going to miss a lot throughout.
Well, since you learned closing and then you got into lead gen, let's kind of take the interview in that direction too. Let's, I love your interest in the psychology of selling and just how much you really break down the whole sales process, which is something I need to do probably better at myself. So what is your sales process look like? Like whether it's cold, whether it's inbound, you're now talking to a human.
Mhm.
And you know that human needs
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 help
what you serve.
sometimes.
They needs help with something. Like, what
Sure.
does that look like for you? Like, it can be this can be as lengthy of a conversation as it needs to be, or it can be short, whatever whatever you're thinking. Like, how does that look like in your head when you get that call or you make that call, you have someone on the phone?
Yeah, so right now, I'll admit I'm not really doing much of the calling anymore. I've very luckily got a team that's doing a lot. So at this point, they bring them to me and they fill my calendar, which is great.
Hell yeah.
Before that, yeah, it's
Hell
great.
yeah.
Yeah, just little flex there. No, just so, um, but it's great because they do. I get to have direct feedback with them, and we just open communication about what we're looking for and who are we attacking and who are we going after. What are the conversations we're having? They put them on my calendar, and let's say that first conversation is in front of me, and we're sitting here just like this. At that point, it really depends. Sometimes people just take calls. Sometimes people have a reason and an agenda. Sometimes people are in a buying window. They're like, no, 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 we have a problem and we need to fix this now.
Mm,
Well, obviously, those are the ones we love. But if we just waited for the timing of those, the amount of meetings you're going to be able to set a month is basically based on the amount of calls you can make. It just becomes a number game.
mhm.
But you can also have people that are maybe just looking to make an introduction and people that are just looking to hear what's out there. And those conversations can be beneficial too.
Yeah.
I think that people oftentimes neglect those. So depending on the situation, really depends on how that first call goes. But I'm listening to the people, their calls beforehand with one of my BDRs. I want to know the vibe of what they were talking about. I don't want
Yeah.
to go into a situation and be like, tell me about the problems you're having.
Yep.
When they told my guy they're having a
Yep.
good relationship, because then it's just a weird pressure sell situation.
Yep.
So I could start it with pushing them to my agenda, or I could say, hey, listen, it sounds like things are actually going pretty well for you right now, but I still don't want this to be a sales call. So if at the very end, this is really just a handshake for down the road, uh, that's a cool plan for me. Like, is that all right with you? And, just
Cool.
agree to set the stage
Yep.
and then just learn about them. So, for example, if you're meeting with a company, go into their industry, learn about how they acquire customers, learn about their workflows, learn about the different aspects of their business and how they interact with one another.
Mm.
That way, it isn't just like hey, tell me about your workflow,
Yeah.
but you can actually speak to experience and layering a little bit of social proof.
Yep.
And, you could say, a lot of practice managers we work with that are experiencing communication issues also feel that in other parts of the business. Like, are you noticing that throughout the office? Are other people noticing that as well?
Mm.
And you're starting to ask better questions because you actually understand their space.
Yep.
And so, kind of a
It's
long-winded way, but it's
it's
just
ama it's amazing how much credibility that adds.
it does.
100%. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I would do that stuff in the meetings all the time. Like,
Mhm.
just show them you're on their level. Like, let's not just all talk technology.
Yeah.
And for those listeners that are MSP Camp members, go like there's a reason we publish the pain points and opportunities with every campaign. Like, if you're about to meet with a client in the veterinarian space or the property management space or the legal space, go to that pain points and opportunity. Even if you're not going to use a single piece of marketing collateral in the campaign, read the pain points and opportunities because these are the actual pain points, that vertical, and the actual opportunities we often can use to serve that vertical. So, like, to prepare for your sales meeting, you could look at that as part of your research just to kind of get on what
Absolutely.
Steve is saying here.
Yeah, and
Okay.
the better you can show up to that meeting just talking and speaking their language, even if they're happy with who they have, and this is a conversation for 8 months down the road, then who do you think they're gonna call? Who are they gonna remember from that first call if they say they took a meeting with 5 different people and you're the only one that is talking specifically to their office workflows and the systems that they use and the typical issues that people run into within that space? They're
Yep.
gonna think of you, and that's really the best thing that you can do is just position yourself for the future follow-up. And
Yeah.
then when something does happen or that relationship does deteriorate, that's that's when we're able to make our move, so to
Yep.
speak, and get them into a process.
I love how that you disarm them early on. Like,
Yeah.
especially because if you listen to the recording and you realize, okay, this someone's kind of like they're early, they're open to the problem, they understand the problem, or maybe even before that, they haven't even addressed the problem yet, but they're willing to take the intro call. You're kind of disarming them right off the bat. You're saying like, hey, you know what? I kind of understand where you're at. I kind of heard where you're at, and if this is just a introduction call, get to know each other, that's great. Like, such a disarming way where they're kind of at ease.
Mhm.
And it's funny, there was a book back in the day, I think it's called The Game or something. And it's like if you're going to try and like pick up a woman
Mhm.
at a bar or whatever, one way to disarm them is to say, "Hey, I only have 5 minutes or I only have 3 minutes before I have to like, catch this or I got to go or I got to meet a friend or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
I kind of needed your thoughts on something." And it immediately disarms that person, whether it's a woman, if you're a woman trying to talk to a guy talk to whatever it is, you're disarming them saying they understand, like, okay, cool, I can give you my full attention because like if things go badly, you're leaving anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
But
a
if things
pattern
go
interrupt. It's a
yeah,
com
it's a pattern interrupt. And then it's like if things going well, you're like, you know what, I'm gonna push that thing back because you can get the vibe of the person you're talking to. Do they want to keep talking to you or not? Are they
yeah.
moving away from you? And so
Mhm.
it's like that's such a great disarming technique. So I love that you've incorporated that. Okay, so you're talking to them, you kind of know where their journey because you did your research before the call, which is so important on their industry and them and whatever the BDR said. Great. And kind of what happens after that?
Well, again, it depends on that conversation. We'll just say
Yeah.
that this person there's something there. Let's just say that. Because if they're not there, then that's gonna be a follow-up rhythm, and whatever I can find between that point and the next 4 months, I send them a checklist of things that you should have. I talk about that at the end of my call too, so they know.
Mhm.
So it's not like me just being weird, like, hey, compare this to your provider. It's like, hey, you never know. Sometimes people miss things. It just can help
Yeah.
you. But let's say that they actually have some form of pain, or there's something that we actually might be able to help them with. I really like to get on site. I do my best work when I get to shake a hand and
Yeah.
talk to people. And I've always found that it's just a great way to humanize something, and a process that's typically, ever since COVID too, is just not, we don't get to see people as much. So it's good to get in person, shake hands, walk to different places, see their environment, see what you might be able to extract from that. But I like to phrase it, and I actually anchor this in the first call. I pull up a map and say, hey, listen, we're right here. Like, this is our introduction call. Next, typically what happens, if you're open to it, is I would actually come on site and I would do a little bit
Mm,
of a IT assessment, hand in hand with a business assessment, because they
yeah.
work together. And I want to make sure that, one, we can match what you're doing, and that I can look around and make sure that we can actually help you with the things
Mm,
that we do.
hmm.
And so positioning it like that, that this isn't just an IT decision, but one that wraps into business.
Yeah.
You can also potentially multi-thread into different um, departments, and you can actually rope in, C-level, or you could rope in other managers, directors, whatever.
Hmm.
And so that's really the direction I like to go. I like to get on site. I like to do that assessment, but it depends on if they're ready for that.
Yeah.
If I talk to them at the end of that first call and I'm like, hey, is anybody else aware of this? Like, are other people feeling this? Is C-level asking you to take a look at this, or
Hmm.
whatever, however I phrase that? Based on that answer is how I'm going to go about the next step. If they're like, yeah, there's definitely some things we can fix, but really right now it's just me, then we have a lot of work to do before I come on site and probably get you into a formal process. Whereas
Hmm.
if they're all hands on deck and they're in a tough situation, then I'm probably going to be like, all right, well, let's have a conversation with some of those people. I'll come on site and I'll catch them up to speed on what we're talking about and what we think the next step should be.
Yep.
So it's unfortunate, because it's always one of those, if this happens, then do that, or if
Yep.
this happens, then do that. So like I said, it's not always going to be linear, but it's making sure they're comfortable moving to the next step and then just guiding them through that door.
Love it.
Yeah.
There's it's almost like we need to, I almost want to like include this as, like, I always thought I wasn't that great at sales because I never stuck to a really strict process. And like
Hmm.
hearing how you go about things, I'm like, great. So I was on there, like we're all on the
Yeah.
right track, right? Because
I still think I'm bad at sales. I like
yeah,
still, it's
yeah,
like, it's
exactly.
just
Like
natural.
I think at this point, the amount of MRR I've closed is like hundreds of thousands, and I'm still like, I'm not good. Like I've
Not that
gotten
good.
lucky, or they're
Yeah,
warm, or
exactly.
whatever.
Exactly.
Um, but here's like a metaphor I would have just based on hearing what you're saying and everything else. So I'm a huge fan of jujitsu. I love
Yeah.
jujitsu, and oftentimes when I'm studying jujitsu, because I watch a lot of instructionals because I'm a total loser.
Yeah,
But
of course.
if I watch as many jujitsu instructionals, or if I watch as much marketing instructionals as I do jujitsu instructionals, I probably have a $20 million company. But
Yeah, right.
anyway, so they always say it's like you can learn specific moves. And I think a lot of sales people and strategy and process, they want to teach like these are the specific moves you do in
Yes.
this order, right?
Mhm.
And but every good jujitsu instructor, the ones I listen to, it's like, no, no. What we need to understand is the concepts.
Yes.
We need to understand the concepts of frames to keep somebody off of your body. Like you need to be able to frame. Can I
Mhm.
show you every single frame based on every position someone's going to come at you? No, that would be a
Yep.
waste of your study time. That would be a waste. It would take you forever to understand every minute detail of how to frame to keep someone off of you. But if you understand that frames keep people off of you and you must protect inside control and
Mhm.
not let them have inside control, that concept we can spend 3 hours on.
Mhm.
And instead of showing, I mean, yeah, we're going to show you some specific moves, but understanding the concept in different environments and scenarios is what's going to make you a better practitioner.
Mhm.
And that's the best way to learn sales. It's like, okay, the concept is we need to disarm them, right? The concept is we need to make sure they know the next step in the process is I
Mhm.
want to come meet with you. And where are you based on my process? Can I approach that now? Should I just
Mhm.
plant the seed now, or should I push a
Mhm.
little harder for this now? And it
Exactly.
depends on what you said earlier on, that person.
Mhm.
Because if you force the same process on everybody when that person is at a different part in their buyer's journey, you're gonna look like an idiot. I mean, you may
Friction.
not look like an
It
idiot,
just
but
it
like
just
you
causes
said,
friction. You
yeah,
be
it's not gonna unlock the lock you wanna unlock.
you become the salesperson
Yeah.
that we don't want. You're not the consultant anymore. There's almost an agenda. Like, hey, do you want to take the meeting? Like, hey, can we move this forward? Hey, do you think those it just becomes you're that person that we don't want to be. And everyone's been that person in their sales career at some point. We've been
Yeah.
that rep that is just chasing something way too hard. But
Mm,
to your point, I actually use that a lot with cold calling, because cold calling is very on the spot quick. You need to,
mm,
especially, you have your frameworks and you have your, but every once in a while there's something that someone throws at that you need to, buy your time sometimes. So we have little strategies like, hey, sometimes they're just going to throw you for a loop. We have little stuff like, oh, excuse me, sorry, I was just writing something down, and I'm sorry, man, I'm a slow writer. Like, it's a
mm,
humanizing thing, but it's a little trick just to buy yourself 5 seconds if you
mm.
lost yourself in a call.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to your point, it's rolling with people, and that's
Yeah.
what jujitsu is about. Is trying to, well,
Yep.
actually, I should ask you. I don't do jujitsu, but
No, that's
it
exactly it.
appears it's
Yeah.
like, can you roll with somebody? What's the
Yeah.
next thing? Are you peeking around the corner? Are you
Yep.
and so, yeah, I think it's a really good and a really good comparison, especially with sales, because we're oftentimes so logical that we lose, and we want that process to be so perfect front to back, and it's written out and it's in an Excel spreadsheet and it's beautiful. But the Mike Tyson, what's it? Everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face. Like, you can't just follow a linear process for something that has so many different variables. And
Yeah.
if you do that too deeply, you actually lose the human touch and you start to systemize the people. And there
Mm.
needs to be human connection for a sale to be made. And
Yeah.
so it can
100%.
actually limit you if you get too process oriented sometimes.
Yep.
But
Zooming out, what are, if we think about the key concepts based on your process, so if we
mhm,
zoom out a little bit, what does your structure look like? Because obviously, I mean, it's going to depend, but like if we zoom out and it's like, okay, what are the key points of moving them down the line? It's like, okay, call, on-site meeting, we need to do that. Key things to achieve on the on-site meeting, and then like, what does the follow-up look like for you?
mhm,
What is the 6 month follow-up for you?
mhm.
You know, what does that process look like for you? Because
Yeah.
obviously you closed a lot of big deals, your close rate's great. I'm super impressed. What does that structure look like? Obviously, a ton of malleability within that.
Absolutely, sure. But
Mm,
again, it's I hate to give the political answer, but it
yeah,
depends on the situation. But
yeah,
if I get to that first meeting, I'm having conversations, and I just feel that, and I listened and I know they have a good relationship, I'm not asking them about problems at all, because I
mm,
can, and you can, there are some things you can do. So one thing that I really like to do is ask people, Tahir, it seems like things are going pretty good for you right now. Like, it, honestly, I'm not hearing anything that causes for us to really move this conversation forward. If anything, I think a follow up would be great.
mhm,
But I'm curious, if you were to, I know this is a silly question, so just, kind of stay with me here. But like, if you were to rate just where you're at right now, like a 1 to 10, even say,
yeah,
one being, I want to leave them tomorrow, and 10 being they're the best ever, like, where would you put yourself?
yeah,
And so even just asking that question, you're going to get an answer on a scale, depending on what they say. If they go 8, 9, 10, all right, fair enough. All right, fair enough. Like, sounds like they're doing a good job. Do you mind me asking you a little bit of what you have coming up in the next 6 months? Just so if I am going to follow up with you, I don't want it to be that, hey, just checking in, but I'd actually like to be able to maybe do a little bit of digging. If I'm a good resource to have as far as IT related things in your space, so maybe I can look up some information for you. I can send some stuff your way. You're just trying to figure out what they're up to so you can have good conversations with them when you do follow up.
yeah,
Say they give you a 7 or below, then maybe I could be like, okay, well, if it's at a 7 or a 6, and sometimes you can plant seed, be like, hey, you kind of said 7, but I'm gonna be honest with you, Tyler, it kind of sounded like you really meant a 5. I could be misreading you, but I'm just based on how you said it. And sometimes people agree. They're like,
yeah,
yeah, and then your silver bullet kind of worked, and
yep,
they start to tell you about some of those problems, and it breaks down.
yeah,
But if they, if you say, it sounds like it's like a 6 or a 7, is there anything that you can close that gap with? Like, if you were to go out there and look for a provider, is there anything you could do to get it to a 9, or
mm,
as close as possible to a 10, as I guess we'd call realistic? Like, is there anything we could do?
mhm,
Maybe you get something, and maybe you get some good info, and then maybe down the road that problem that they mentioned worsens, and then you can talk
yeah,
to them about what we can do next and if it makes sense to talk. So it's really just, it's planting little seeds and learning. So
yeah,
it's not always about the pain and digging at that, because sometimes that's just not the place to do it. You're
mhm,
always qualifying but sometimes it takes a little bit more of a longer approach.
Yep.
And you can't just go in hot with, tell me all your problems. I know they're there, but you have
Yep.
to plant the seed for a future successful conversation.
I love it. I love it, man. And this is it's kind of funny how much these two things align on what you're saying and the launch of MSP Camp. So when I had the idea for MSP Camp, I was like, okay, this is like I'm solving a real problem that I have right now. I was like, so I'm sure somebody's gonna want this. Like I was sure of it, but I didn't know for sure. And so when we finally launched, the day we launched, and I got that first purchase, and the person was happy with the purchase. Like they bought the thing, and then they said, "Oh, this is great."
Yep.
When that moment happened, I knew I was just going to keep pushing as fast and quickly as I possibly can to make it good. Because if I was able to make one human happy with this thing I just built, there's a lot more of those humans out there, and I need to go hard.
Yep.
It was like the greatest rocket under me.
Yeah.
And when I take a sales meeting with the when I was at the MSP, it's like, one, it's difficult to sales appointments. I was probably going to, maybe 2 or 3 a month. Nothing crazy, right? I wish some months obviously was a lot more than that, and some months were less, but averaging 2, 3, maybe 4 a month. And that was almost the same mentality I went going in to that sales meeting. I was like, okay, I know you're interested. Like, I mean appointment like on site. Like if I made it on site,
There has to be a level. Yeah.
Exactly. And you have been pre-qualified. I know you're the number of users. I know your industry I like. I know you're a prospect I want, or I wouldn't have went to the meeting. Like if you were 3 employees or if you didn't have the budget or all those things, I would not have wasted my time getting on site. I just wouldn't have. I'm too busy. I'm also doing the marketing. You're also doing the client success manager. Like we have to spend time pre-qualifying or we're going to waste everybody's time. So if I came on site to your office, that means you're a legitimate prospect and you almost bought my shit. Obviously, I'm hoping you do, but you may not. If you don't, it's okay because I know you are the fit, just like that first MSP buyer was a fit. So I'm going to be on you.
Yes.
I'm going to be on you forever, like I know you do. I'm going to, and everything we talked about in that meeting, the 8 things that really bothered you, the thing that the 3-point gap between 7 and 10, those things that you said that could have helped you get to a 10. Oh, I'm going to send you videos on that. I'm going to send you content on that. I'm going to send you resources about your industry around that. I'm going to make sure not only was I listening in the meeting, I was listening to the meeting so much I remember 10 months from now because I've got notes on it.
Or you're getting an email from me around that time. Like I'm gonna follow up with you, and you're gonna get that email. You're gonna get that information. I'm gonna try and find a way to make you think that I need to talk to this guy. Like this is the person that I need to talk to. He should be handling my IT. Sometimes, just like you said, you can't change people's mind. It just isn't a good time. The relationship never seems to get worse, and it's like, okay, hey, happy to follow up, but if there's a problem and there's pain, that's when we're there.
I almost think in the MSP space, there's never really a lost opportunity unless you wanted to lose it. Like there's no real lost opportunity. It's just the sales cycle might be longer than you expected. There's been so many times that lead that I talked to came on a year later. They came on a year and a half later. They came on 3 years later. Just persistence. I think a lot of salespeople, they have this interest. Like if we looked at a graph where it's like, okay, like level of attention on that client, it would like, a lot of salespeople, it's like super. And the only reason I'm saying this is because people sell to me all the time, right? I'm a business owner now. Even before that, I was a VP. So people always trying to sell me shit. It was like the level of engagement of that salesperson went up like off the charts for the first month and then fell like a rock.
And then it's like, where are you? I haven't heard from you in 8 months. It's just
right. Whereas I think we probably have a similar style where it's like, you're going to get a lot of my attention at first, right? Like there's a really nice ramp up, but it never really goes all the way down. Like you're still, okay, unless I see you signed a 3-year contract, then it's going to be a little bit lower, right? But
exactly.
But it's going to come up and then it kind of just levels out. Like you're just going to hear from me. I got you on my, opportunity board. Like I'm going to keep following up with you. I'm going to keep talking to you. And it's not always just kind of following up. It's not going to be following up. It's going to be like,
hey, just checking in.
It
doesn't
do
anything. It just, exactly. Like they're going to go, we're good.
I would send them articles like, hey, this is coming, like blah, blah, like the NCE stuff. I would just send people these things based on our conversations. They're like, man, this guy is he's persistent in the right type of way,
Yeah.
right?
It's not just the, "Hey, just looking like, is your business ready to jump into my process?" It's not that. It's,
Yeah.
hopefully there's a little bit of value behind it. And if you call someone in 6 months and say, "Hey, you were going through an EMR migration and you were moving from X to X, and I know that typically wraps itself in IT pretty heavily. How did your provider handle it, and how did the office get through it?" It's a
Yeah.
better question than, "Hey, just checking in, like we
Yep.
talked 6 months ago." It's like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I don't
Yeah.
care." So
Okay.
you
Yeah.
have to, it needs to be worth it,
Yep.
and you need to set yourself up for that conversation though. So you need to realize in that moment, okay, this isn't a selling stage. I'm just having a conversation and learning about their business so you can gather those details.
Yep.
Yeah.
On the psychology side of things, what are some maybe key tips you might have for someone in the sales meeting? We're going to get to the calling side of things too, but
Yeah.
like in the meeting, like, are there any kind of other interesting um, expertise on that, like
Yeah,
this then type of stuff?
yeah, there's so much. Uh, I love Chris Voss. I love
Mhm.
mirroring and labeling, which is really just listening really well and
Mm.
repeating so you can make sure you're understanding something.
Mhm.
Those things are just timeless tools. It
Yep.
it really does help you connect with people and let them know like, hey, I'm listening to you. So just little psychology tips like mirroring, labeling, paying attention to people's body language, paying
Yeah.
attention to engagement. People will get off. I've jumped off calls in my past where I'm like, man, I nailed that. Like that was so good. And then it goes nowhere. And
Mm.
after reflecting or watching it back or looking at it,
Yeah.
you're like, they weren't really engaged. It was just me. I was talking well. And I thought
Yeah.
that's what means it's a good meeting. And
Yes.
and that it couldn't have been further from the truth. And sometimes I think it's called the dark horse of any deal. There's always something, like people's motivations are always slightly hidden at times. Typically,
Mm.
there's always a little self-interest involved in a deal. And so being able to figure out if something is off early is really important. And you can do that through a number of ways. But I would really pay attention to, it's small stuff. Like, have you been on 2 calls and they haven't put on their camera yet? And they haven't, like, it's just little
Mm.
stuff, like, are they engaged? Have they asked
Yeah.
you any questions? Or are they just looking for information? And are they
Yeah.
just asking basic level stuff, like, "How much do you cost?" And
Yeah.
and are they just fishing for information? So, I think that people are, although they're typically trying to hide intention, most people are pretty bad at hiding intention, and there's
Mhm.
breadcrumbs within psychology that can help you uncover those things. And I'm a firm believer in making your pipeline and your opportunities, only put something in there if it's a real opportunity. And that's
Yeah.
something that I've had to work on over the years, because you want to chase everything. But when you want to chase everything and you want to close every deal, you start to miss things, and those little cues add up. And then you get to the end, you ask them, are we doing this or not? And they don't answer you, or there's no follow up, or they ghost you entirely. And it's because you're missing little details that if you had just paid a little bit more attention to, with
Mhm.
regards to all the things we just mentioned, you might be able to pick up on it. So just
Dude.
deep paying attention, like really paying attention to people.
Yeah.
I It looks like you're about to say something, but
No,
sorry to
go
cut
ahead.
you off.
Go
I
ahead.
I recommend to everybody. It's a difficult read because it's very well written, but if you've ever read Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene,
Hmm.
it is just gold. Like a everything he talks about people intentions and what they're after and how people use each other, and it's very interesting. But it's good defense, because when you learn about these things, as long as you have good intention and you like what you sell, which I'm pretty sure everybody that is in our space that we know and talk with is on the same page. Like, you need to like what you sell and you need to believe in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But there's people who are going to exploit the fact that you want to actually help them. And so being able to pick up on that stuff early, and a book like that shows you a lot about the real character of some people's intentions. And you can then play defense against that and be like, okay, you're just here wasting my time. Like, you're
Yeah.
not you're not actually interested in what we're doing.
Yeah.
So
I'm so glad you mentioned dude, it's just so funny you saying that. It's like so many flashbacks of when you think you killed it in the meeting or on the call,
yeah. It
And then
just,
you reflect later at night. Like, I mean, there was nights I was literally staring at the ceiling, so it was like a pretty big deal, and I fucked it up.
yeah,
And I
oh
was
yeah,
like, "How did I mess it up?" And I thought back, I'm like, "Well, yeah." Like, there was all these signals
yep,
that I missed because I was being fluent, and I
yes,
was like, I
yeah,
was hitting all the things, like, I was like, "Man, I should have been on a podcast right there."
right,
Like, you know,
yeah. You walk
like,
out of there like, I nailed it.
I
Every part of
know.
that, I nailed. Yeah,
And then you look back and you're like, "No, I didn't. I didn't nail it. I didn't
yeah,
nail it. Yeah, I
good,
sounded good. I sounded great,
yeah.
but I didn't." But they were thinking about something else. I was talking about things that weren't what their primary thing was. If I would have listened better, I could have talked on that string of thought.
I was pushing my agenda. I
Yeah, I
was
was
pushing what I
pushing.
wanted. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And there's this interesting thing. It happened to me a lot when I first launched MSP Camp because I was so excited about MSP Camp that I would jump on calls with people. I would be on an hour-long call to sell $100 a month membership. I don't do that anymore,
yeah.
and I wouldn't sell it.
Mhm,
So I'd spend all this time talking about MSP Camp and how, and I was so passionate about it. I would just
mhm.
talk and like I was like, "There's no way they're not interested in this. I mean, this is the
Yeah,
shit."
yeah,
And then like
exactly.
they wouldn't sign up, and I was like, "They
Yeah,
said they were going to sign up today, and
yeah,
it was a trial."
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
because I was doing all the talking.
mhm.
I was doing all the talking. It was all about my product. It was all about me. It was all about why they should love it. Sales is not that hard. It is not that hard when we can make it about the person on the other end.
It's just it's making sure that you understand that each time you talk to someone, there's things that are gonna be similar, but a lot of it's gotta be tailoring it to that person,
Yeah.
or it just doesn't work. So it's so individual to individual, but if you step out from a broad perspective, there is process that you can follow, but it's
And
almost yeah, sorry, go ahead.
here's a concept. And like this is just from my own like anecdote based in meetings. It's like almost every time where I've talked more than the person across from me,
Never gone well.
I didn't close the deal.
Mhm,
Like if I had actual stats, like if I had these Fireflies AI tools that I use now based on like,
mhm.
okay, what percentage was I talking? I can almost guarantee if I line that up on a graph, it'd be like, yeah, the times you talk more than 50 or more than 60%,
Bad
you
calls.
your close rate goes down.
Yeah. I would 100% agree with that. I've my best calls, after reflecting and understanding how this stuff actually works, I've just asked really good questions, and people have given me a lot of information from those questions, and then just letting them know I'm listening to what you're saying, and then giving them the vacation, not the plane ride, is a big component of what I think is helpful for a lot of people. I think they want to talk about their stack and their tech and all this stuff.
Mhm.
And it does become a losing conversation. So if you can layer all of those things and then be like, hey, this is what it feels like at the end of
Mhm.
this thing, as
Yep.
opposed to, hey, here's all the turmoil
Yep.
and roadblocks to get
Yep.
there, you're just going to set yourself up for a really, really great call.
Dude, that's such an insightful thing. Like anyone listening kind of needs to go back and re-listen to that because that's exactly it. Our pledge number 12, I know we're lame, but we have our 12 pledges at MSP Camp.
Yeah.
And number 12 is I pledge to not sell help desk, but use the client's challenges and opportunities to vision build
Mhm.
a better life for them and their organization.
Mhm.
Like that's oftentimes what I was trying to do. I wasn't trying to fix little problems. I was trying to vision build with them
Mhm.
because every executive has a vision or they wouldn't have a business. They would not have a
Yeah,
business if they don't have a vision.
absolutely.
So if you can align what their vision is with you, you can jump on board that vision and help them have clarity in that vision and how technology is going to get whatever vision it is. You are indisposable.
Yes.
Because I know as now as an owner, and even when I was at Alltek, but especially now as an owner, like when I have a vision for something, like, hey, we are going to do the agency services or we are going to
Mhm.
do whatever. And a lot of people listening to this are owners. When you have a vision, I know for a fact you're willing to invest a lot to make that vision happen. Because I
Mhm.
know I am. Because like if I see it and this is where we're going, like what do I need to get there?
Mhm.
It cost is no longer that much unless I don't have the money, then cost is obviously a problem.
Yes.
If I have
Obviously,
the
yes.
resources to get to where I'm trying to go,
Mhm. We're
we're going.
going.
We're
Exactly.
going. And if
Mhm.
you can show based on exactly what you just said, show them the vacation. That's the vacation they want. And if you can align what you do with the vacation they want, the vision they have,
Hmm.
price quickly does not become an objection. And that is another concept that we can talk about. How do we do that? Yeah, there's 10 million things you can memorize to step by step on how to get to the vision. But at the end of the day, if you listen well, and what do people love doing? They love talking about themselves, which
Hmm.
includes their business. So if you
Yes.
can really have them talk about their business, I'll talk about this shit all day if somebody's asking me about it. I don't want to be that egotistical and just talk about MSP Camp. But if
Sure.
someone's truly interested in
Oh,
probing that
you're
idea,
gonna open up. Yeah,
oh, I'm gonna be like, bro, this is exactly what we're doing. This is
exactly.
exactly how I'm gonna get there. And you go, oh, that's exciting. We should do this, and this is how
Hmm.
this can help this, and that's gonna help you get there. 12 months. Let's do 6.
Yeah, exactly. And
And
it becomes a tool. And like you
yeah,
said, you're not. It's like I forget who said this, but it's like being a travel agent and being like, hey, you have 2 layovers, and you're gonna have to check all these bags, and you're gonna have to balance your 3 kids while juggling your luggage. But when you get to Cali, it's gonna be like it just. Or you could tell them like what it's gonna be like to sit on the cliff with the breeze running through their hair, with a
yeah,
drink in their hand, and
yes,
you can sell them on where you're going as opposed to the barriers. And it's
yeah,
but you need to learn about them to do that too. You need to know what their interests are,
yeah,
because I could sell you on the vacation, but you're not looking to go to that place. You're looking to go somewhere completely different. And then
yep,
there's that friction again. It's like this guy's
yep,
not listening to me. So
yes,
yeah.
yes,
And it kills all deals. It will. So you need to listen so carefully, and overwrite your notes and scribble everything down that you can possibly think of after that meeting when it's fresh, and revert back to it. That is your ammunition for later conversations and that future potential partnership.
yeah. As Bruce Lee said, be like water.
Be like water.
Be like water. Fill, fill
Exactly.
fill the vase.
Just
Wow. I think the accent shifted a little on me there, but
yeah, you're definitely getting canceled after that one. That's
but no, we gotta be the water. I
be
mean, you
like
do.
water.
You gotta
Fluid.
just
You do.
okay, yeah. You're a
You need
bowl,
to
okay? I can be a
yeah.
bowl. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
you
you're
need
a
to
vase.
match to
Let's
the
go.
situation. You have
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
If you go in the same way, if you talk to 2 separate people and you're the exact same person, one person can love you and one person can hate you. So I'm not saying change who you are, but you need to adapt to the situation, and you
that's
need
a
to
good
talk
way to
to
put it. That's a
yeah,
great way
you
to put
need
it,
to
yeah,
adapt to.
yeah.
It's like
I
it it's almost selfish if you think about it. Like if you walk into the room and you're like, I'm gonna be 100% me no matter what. I'm gonna say what comes to my mind. And like that's almost a selfish approach because it's just
mm,
putting the focus on I as opposed to the 10 other people in the room. So
dude,
to slightly adapt and alter that to, marry the personas, it's something that
bro.
has to be done.
That's so insightful. That's so true. I've never felt like I've had to not be myself ever in a
Yeah.
business meeting, sales meeting. I've never, but I've had to adapt the things I was about to say like crazy
Yeah.
or how I said it like crazy. Like
You
sometimes I
catch
have to be real.
yourself. You just
Yeah.
catch you. You're like, I shouldn't ask that. That's not a good question or
Yeah.
whatever. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I've never had to ever in my life that I can remember in a sales meeting had to be fake, where I'm like
Mhm.
pretending to be someone I'm not, or
Yeah.
pretending, like saying things because I think they want me to say. It's like, no, like I need to say this. This needs to be
Yeah.
said to address something or to move in the direction I need them to be moved. And
It's
authentic sales is solid.
it's a slippery slope because if someone asks you, you could get into a situation where someone asks you a question, you're trying to be this thing,
Yeah.
and then it's like you're answering a question that you don't know the answer to, and now you're getting into just tricky waters where you're not even giving good info. So yeah,
Yeah.
just stay. And that's another thing too. You should be able to say, I don't know the answer, but I'll find
Yeah.
out for you. Like that was
Yeah.
a big thing I had to learn
Oh,
early on. You want to be
oh
able to
yeah.
say yes to everything. And they're like, can you do this? And you're like, you don't want to say no. So you're like, let me check. And you realize you don't do it. But it's one of those things where they're going to be more happy with you saying that up front. So expectations set so they don't get 6 months down the road and they're like, oh, I thought you did this. And then it's, oh, well, now we don't. Like you just be yourself, but stand your ground and just answer questions truthfully and just give good info. It's really what it's about.
I love that. And my career trajectory where I'm currently at, I really like working with true professionals, like the videographers for ScaleCon, the people that do our website. I like working with people that are true professionals. Like when I hire a contractor now or vendor, price is not usually even something on my mind.
I just
I
want to
want
work with
someone that
people who
yeah,
want to work.
I want someone that's got their shit together. And oftentimes, here's one thing I know or feel that someone got their shit together when they tell me no.
Mhm. Yeah.
So if I'm saying like, this is my thing, and they say, okay, this is why that won't work, or
Yeah.
this is why we can't do that, because of
Exactly.
how our structure works, how this process works, what you're trying to do, that's not going to work.
Exactly.
When I hear that, my confidence goes up a lot with a
Hmm.
person I'm talking to. And like, they're going to say it in a professional way. They're not going to be a dick.
Yeah.
And when I get pushback, when I get no, I am now more bought into this person, which I know
Mhm.
people listening like that sounds a
No,
little
it's
silly, but
no,
there's
it makes sense. It
yeah, there's
shifts
so
your
many times.
psychology.
Yeah, there's so many times when I was talking to an MSP prospect where I put up the barriers and showed them where the barriers were. And
Hmm.
I was stern on that. There was no, we don't go past this. We don't go past, this is what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Um, and it helped close the deal. Another one of these things I would do often is like, there were times, so many times in MSP camp history, we had to stop marketing. We had to stop
Hmm.
adding clients. I think it was like 3 different times where it's like, no, we can't. So I would, when I was going to sales meetings, our onboarding was actually backed up 2-3 months.
Hmm.
I would tell them that. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm super glad you want to come on. This is great. I'm going to tell you early on, like, or, before we really get too far into this, we can't even onboard for 2.5 months.
Hmm.
Not one time in the history, and this was a lot of times I had to say that, did that dissuade the sale. And most of the time my close rate went up,
Hmm.
because the other MSPs like, oh, we can start tomorrow. We got
Yeah.
this going. It's like, okay, so nobody wants you. There's
Yeah.
no scarcity.
Hmm.
There's no exclusivity.
Yeah.
You're just trying to get my business as fast as you can. You said yes to everything.
Yeah.
You want to bring me on right now. Whereas this other guy, he's a true consultant. He's listened to everything I have to say. He knows my industry. He says, oh, we're going to have to book you in a month out because
Yeah.
people want us. And he set up boundaries. Like, that's the person, as a mature business owner, that we would often talk to.
Hmm.
That's what they want. They don't
Exactly.
want that. I'll take anybody at $30 a user, blah, 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 blah. They don't want that. I
Yeah, you
mean,
start you
the
start
good news
making
is,
those
okay,
concessions early, and it just compounds too. It's just not a successful stage for the partnership. And
yep,
I agree with you completely. I even like to say to people like, hey, listen, I'm vetting you in these calls as much as you're vetting me. I want to make sure that
mm-hmm,
you're a fit for us, and we don't just say yes to everyone, because I want to make sure we're working with good people who understand what we do, so the expectation's clear. And I don't
yeah,
want to bring people to our team that's not going to be a beneficial relationship for everyone. So,
yep,
and that's another thing to say, when you say something and you actually do that in practice and mean
yep,
it, people start to look at you like, okay, so they don't just take every single business that calls them. They're
yep,
actually vetting and making sure it's a good partnership. And it's a good
yep,
way to do the exact same thing that you said, which is give yourself a little more credibility.
yep. I love it, man. So for those, as we wrap on the actual sales aspect, how much time do I have with you? Do I still have some time? You still
Yeah,
good?
I got time.
Okay.
We're good.
All right. So as we wrap on the sales side before we move into like the actual lead generation side, I think for those listening, I hope as you listen to this conversation, if you're still here, that's great. You've hopefully gotten a lot out of it. But a key point I want to make is, hopefully you understand that sales doesn't have to be such a rigid process, and it's usually not.
Hmm.
And I hear all the time people think they're not good at sales. And I almost want to say, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
Like, you're not good at listening to people.
sure.
You're not
Yeah.
good at communicating your product in a way that other people can understand outside of technology. Let's not even say we're not good at sales. Let's kind of pinpoint, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, what are
Hmm.
you talking about? You're not good at sales. So I hear it all the time. They're like, well, we get leads. We don't know how to close leads because I'm bad at sales. It's like, no, it's not that you're bad at sales. It's like, you're probably not listening well enough.
There's
Or you probably don't know the
150
talking.
variables that
Yeah,
you
you
that
don't know the talking points of your service well enough to communicate to someone that's not technical. Those are the
Mhm,
things you should work on. Let's break down the individual common denominators of where are you struggling when you're in these conversations, because
mhm,
that's what they are. They're conversations. Someone has an issue with their business or current partner. Let's find out what the issue is.
mhm.
Let's find out what their vision is for their business, and let's apply what we do to that vision.
Yeah,
Simple structure, and then practice. I hear
yeah,
all the time. I hear all the time
over
people
and
are like,
over.
oh my God, dude. I never really took any sales training. I read some sales books, but like,
Mhm,
what got me good at sales is I met with hundreds of businesses.
mhm.
So the more you meet with people, the more vibes you can check while you're in those meetings, your
Absolutely.
close rate goes up, as long as you're open-minded and you're listening well, right?
You just learn.
Yeah.
You learn about humans and other people, and
Yeah.
you mature in it. When I started in sales, I think I was 24-ish, something, 5 years ago at this point, maybe a
Yeah.
little bit longer even. You have to learn and position yourself as an adult. And if you're,
Yeah.
you have to learn to have better conversations, and you need to learn to I used to walk into meetings and it almost felt like you were discounted and you're like, "Ooh, it's because I'm a young guy." It's like, it has nothing to do with that. If I came in with knowledge of your industry and talked IT and could speak to technical and non-technical and I could merge the conversations, no one's going to care that you're a 24-year-old, but you have to put in that work to learn about what you're talking about.
In fact, they're going to be more impressed.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The younger you
Genesis,
are, it's probably more impressive.
Genesis is 22, I think. She runs the agency right now.
Is she really?
I think she's 22.
That's insane.
Yeah, and she runs the entire agency side of MSP Camp, and she's been with me for not even 8 months. Because I
Wow.
saw early on the level of competency she had as a 22-year-old. I'm like, cool. I'm going to throw a bunch of shit. I threw ScaleCon at her. I threw an agency
Yeah,
at her.
she
I'm
knocked
like,
all of
hey,
it out of the park.
threw it right into the thing. And so if you're talking to someone that's 22 and impressive as hell, knows your industry, blah 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 blah, I'm going to be more impressed. Okay,
Hire them
cool.
faster, right?
What are you going to be in a couple of years, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so cool. I love that discussion, man. This was so much fun as usual. I want to pivot a little bit on the kind of cold calling side of things, because what you've done is incredible. I mean, it truly is incredible what you're doing at GDS. And so I wanted to, you killed it at ScaleCon. Let's shift to that for about 5 minutes or
Yeah,
10 or
absolutely.
whatever. For the listeners, don't worry, it's only going to be 5 minutes. I only have 5 minutes for this last segment, so just stick around. It's going to be a really good conversation. So let's talk about it. Tell me about, what were you struggling with? How did you figure this thing out? Key
Yeah.
processes, results, all that.
Yeah, we just started. It was really just me and I was sitting and I was just looking at my calendar and I had like no meetings for 6 weeks. And I'm an AE who's tasked with closing business, and you're just sitting there like, shit, man. Like this sucks. Like I have no opportunities to look forward to. My pipeline's dry. It was kind of just a back against the wall. Let's start making dials and see if I can talk to people.
Yeah.
This is the second time around, not the first time I got berated and swore it off. A couple years later, I actually revisited it because I tried everything. We had brought on people who said they can get X amount of leads a month and do all this stuff, and it never stuck with us. Not saying that setup can't work, but it never carried over for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started making dials, and I still have my spreadsheet of like manually tracking everything in Excel, and it was just such a tedious process. But we had to learn and put in some proof of concept. And I remember the first time I had connected with someone and really just had a good conversation and kept following up with them. And it was like a 4 6 month follow-up process. Then I got them to a meeting, and then we went through this whole sales cycle, and I finally closed them. And it was around a $5,000-6,000 a month contract. And I remember just being like, okay, dang, this thing can work. Like we just
Yeah.
need to refine it now and scale it. So we started to build out a program, and we started documenting and really just going through those if then statements of like what
Yeah.
happens here, and what are people really saying. Like let's dive behind just I'm not interested. Like is that real, or is that just something someone's saying? And if they're just saying it, how can we interrupt the pattern of their psychology to get them to maybe jump back on our side?
Yeah.
And so just adding technique and documentation and ways that we can connect with people is really what we're doing.
Mm.
But that's really the basis for our entire program right now is that methodology towards getting people in the door.
That's badass. And the callers, you have them call how many people a day typically? What
It
are the numbers?
ranges. Admittedly, right now we're having some data accuracy issues, and that's been
Mm.
on my plate. So we're trying to clean that up a little bit. But because of that inefficiency, it's right around 65 to 70 calls a day.
Oh,
But
yep.
we want to get that. I want to get that to, if you could at minimum make 90 to 110 a day in that range with an efficient system with good data. That's where I
Yeah.
would like to see it.
Yeah.
But that's a couple months down the road.
Yeah.
I would expect.
Yeah, and we were doing our caller was doing 60 dials a day, and we I think we had like 3 members in that period that we were doing it, which isn't crazy, but she paid for herself and more in the short
Mhm.
period before she left, because I didn't do a good job managing a caller, but
Tough
she
to
didn't.
manage it, man.
I
A
know.
whole world
That's
I'm diving into now, but it's
Can you talk
awesome.
about that a little bit? Like, okay, it's not just about getting the caller and giving the scripts and telling them how many times they got to dial on the list. It's also like what?
It's mostly about talking with them through issues that they're having. So
Mm,
we have a Tuesday meeting every morning, 8 to 9 a.m., where we just train and talk, and I'll do script runs with them, and I'll be the buyer, and I'll be like, hey, this is how I would have handled that here. And
mm,
so it's really just going through and finding all the pressure points and figuring out like where, because every dialer has a different problem with the thing that they're doing. Some
mm-hmm.
person might struggle with the ask. Like I finally did it, I nailed everything, and now I just need to ask, and they kind of freeze up. And that's just a mentality thing that we have
Yep.
to address.
Yep.
Some people might shy away when they hear I'm not interested. Like, what do you
Mm.
actually say to try to navigate around that as
Mm.
effectively as possible without being annoying and pushy
Yeah.
and all the normal things that you don't want to be.
Yeah, but
But
possible pass.
exactly. But
Yeah.
I think really if I could boil it down to a thing or a skill or something for someone to look at, it's how you say something. It
Mhm.
really is how you
Yep.
say it.
Yep.
If I sit here and I go to you, hey Tahir, this is Steve with GDS. How are you doing today? It just I
Mm.
come off as like
Mm.
a speedy cold caller just trying to get through my
Totally.
line.
Totally.
Or I'm like, hey Tahir, this is Steve with GDS. How's it going today? Like, it's a
Yep.
little different. It's a little
Yep.
different than the other one, and just slowing yourself down throughout a conversation, a little bit of acting put in there sometimes here or there or
Yep.
whatever, and you can start to just get through, and once you can humanize a conversation and you can say things in a certain way and you can lead a conversation and act like you belong there as opposed to just being like, I'm a cold caller calling someone, but,
Mm.
like, believe in what you're doing and speak to them and,
Yep.
have a confidence about it. Those are really a lot of the things, but tonality and how you say something, it's far more important than the words itself.
Couldn't agree more. Just to show everyone how quickly humans pick up on this. My 5-year-old, I don't remember exactly, but yesterday we were saying something and I said something to him. I didn't raise my voice. I just said something to him. And the
Yeah.
thing I said wasn't mean or bad, but he like immediately turned to me
It
and
was
and
all
I was like,
tone.
what's up? He's like, what's wrong? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, am I in trouble? I'm like, no, I just told you to do the thing. He's like, but the way you said it. He literally said,
Exactly.
but the way you said it. And I realized I was reading a stressful email.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him, and the way, because I was just my body, because I was stressed, and I was talking to him, and I wasn't raising my voice, I wasn't saying anything that he was in trouble. He gave me all his attention. Like, are you all right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
just to, he's 5 and he picks up on that shit. So like your
Exactly.
prospects are picking up on the tonality, which we can
It
practice. We can
It's
practice all the
very
time.
true. Oh, I talk to myself all the time
Oh
in the
my,
car on the
yeah,
way to meeting. You kidding
yeah,
me? It's like
yeah.
I probably look like a crazy person, but it's you just I mean, you got to practice your lines. I admittedly I do it mostly through the training with them now, and I actually like those because I get to make sure I stay close to the action and learn more about what's going on in the
Yep.
actual field of calling, so to speak. But you're right. I mean, the cues are smiling on a phone call. I,
Yeah.
I swear to God, I can tell if somebody's actually smiling when they're
Yeah.
talking to me on a cold call, or at
Yep.
least, and if you're delivering certain lines, and I was very animated, and I tell my guys to do it too. Like
Same.
if I answer, or if you answer, and you're like, "Hello," and you're a stern person, and you're like, "How'd you get this number?" Like, I'm legitimately throwing my hands up on a call where I'd be like, "Oh, Tyler, hey, my bad, man. Like, I
Yeah.
know I'm calling you out of the blue.
Yep.
I know I'm a cold caller. If you don't mind giving me 30 seconds to be honest with you, man, I don't love making these calls, and I'm sure you don't like getting them, but I promise there's a little bit of research behind this. Can you give me 30 seconds?" Humanizing, a little bit
Totally.
different than, defensiveness or whatever. Like, I'm not interested. Oh, how can you be interested? You don't even know what I do yet. Like instant collision, and that will not go
Mhm.
well. But if you can kind of take a step back and de-escalate and give them a humanizing interaction as opposed to just some scripted framework,
Yep.
although it is a framework, but they don't know that. Then it can actually break down that barrier and you
Yep.
can potentially have a conversation. My favorite, the best sets, then first time appointments that my team sets is they'll put in our group chat we have off the side and they'll just say like got one. And it's always the ones where like just use that framework to reverse, like send me an email as an
Mm.
objective, which people hear time and time again.
Yep.
Now we know that email is not going to the person we want, and we know they're not going to call us back, and we know they probably didn't listen to what we said, but overcoming that and getting the person and getting that set, they'll message me off to the side and they're just like, "Damn, man, that actually works. That's awesome."
Yep.
Like, it's just, it's always the ones that cause the most excitement with the team.
That's so awesome. And now what, based on some of your, appointment setting for GDS, like what are some of your results with this framework you created?
Yeah, it really depends. So the cool thing is that we're pretty, I guess, in the grand terms of business, we're in our infancy with this. So we really have about 6 to 8, we're about 6 months of data now. So we're starting to see some really cool trends and see how it fluctuates through different months and connection rates and pickup rates. But At our best month so far, I had an individual caller. I believe he got me 12 or so meetings.
Nice.
And that's between one of them. And then that same caller, something like this month, I think he's at 8 so far. So
Hmm.
last day of the month, he's at 8. So it can vary, but I like that 8 to 12 range. But
Yeah.
I really want to work on making the process and the tools we use as efficient and accurate as possible. And I
Mm.
think it will help us get to that just 12 to 15 a month per caller range. And that's where I want to be. I think that's where just at that point it's going to be, you won't even, at that point you're not even following opportunities like you need this to close, because you're going to
Totally.
have so much that you can just work through them, and
Totally.
it'll be cool. So
I mean,
that's
even
where
8
we're
to
headed.
12, even 8 to 12 is insane, dude. Like that's such an insane number. Like even from my peak, I was not hitting that many leads, appointments. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe that many leads, but that many appointments every single month. Like that's wild.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I just want everybody to pay attention to you. Like I really do. I've been screaming Stephen Young at the freaking at the
I've been
rooftop.
listening. If it makes
Yeah.
any content, I like it.
Same.
I'm like, I'm cheering at the bottom. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Just
It's kind of funny. Me and you are jumping on a call with a different peer group, right? We were in a peer
yeah,
group with our MSPs. We're going to jump on a peer group with another group of MSPs because I'm like, they want to do cold calling and they need a consultant. I'm like, let me get Steve. Like, I
awesome.
got you.
Yeah, I know.
So a couple of things real quick
Yeah,
on everything we're talking about for those still here. Like if you're still here an hour and 5 minutes in, you're like, man, I think I hate Steve. But you know,
yeah,
if you happen to like him,
yeah.
he actually just, this is super cool. We're rolling out the Knowledge Lodge at MSP Camp next week. Steve's got the first course. He's got the first course on the Knowledge Lodge, but it's going to launch with two. Steven's just got his in first, so you get the first one,
Yeah.
and he breaks down everything around this framework that he's built around cold calling, how he's getting 8 to 12 appointments a month. And here's the cool thing: Steve is a true practitioner. This is not a vendor trying to sell you something. This is someone doing it and saying, "Hey, this is exactly how we do it," right? Like that is the best, purest form of source you can get. So it's
Mhm.
kind of cool. He built a whole course. Looks amazing. I went through. It was amazing. He includes all of the different all the different sheets on objections, tonality. It's like 8 different sheets, different scripts, and how to approach them. So if you're interested in this, if you are a cold caller, if you have a cold caller, if you think about hiring a cold caller, this is probably one of the best resources in the channel currently. And I'm not saying that trying to sell you. You could start a trial, watch the course, and cancel. I don't really give a shit. All I care about
Mhm.
is Steve gets some more attention because this is awesome. He's willing to provide this to other MSPs. So really appreciate you doing that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you giving me the call up. I was excited to do it for you, and it looks like it came out pretty well. So I'm fired up for people to get their hands on it. I know everybody wants leads, and they are hard to get in the door. So I've been there, and I've been in the struggle. That's why we had to create this thing.
That's awesome. That's how I felt with MSP came with the content side. I'm like, there's just not good content out there. So I'm like, I just
Yeah,
got to build it. I just have to build it.
do it.
And
Yeah,
that's how you are. You're
exactly.
like, I'm just not getting enough leads. I just got to build it. So,
Absolutely.
and then on the other side of that, I think I'll let you kind of speak on it, but I've really been a cheerleader for Steve as he's thinking about kind of doing what I did,
Hmm.
right? Where he's
Yep.
like, you know what, I got this thing, it's working really well. Maybe I should offer something of value
Hmm.
to MSPs. And do you want to, where are you at with that? Are you still,
Yeah.
what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on
Absolutely.
that whole thing?
So we're jumping into a pilot now with a company that we within our peer group, and we're going to roll it. I want to make sure that, first of all, if we're going to roll this out for other people, we can replicate success in different areas. And luckily for GDS, we have 2 different areas we call in. So we've been able to see small amounts of success in replicating it somewhere. But I really want to make sure if we're going to roll this out, it's not just going to be quite frank, like the other ones that are out
Yeah.
there that promise the world and don't, or delivering for us, I should
Yeah.
say. I'll preface that by saying for us. But if we can come up through this pilot program with the system and roll it out and it works, that we can get people 8+ appointments a month, and there'll be side components to it where there's education resources and information that you can extract from it, then yeah, that's really where we're heading. But we want to get through the pilot. I want a proof of concept, and I want to make sure that we can actually deliver people results, so we have a high quality service. And assuming that goes well over the next couple months, we're going to roll out a full program and try to get this to as many people as possible, so we can start to set. Just get. It seems like the biggest issue with MSPs. I want to grow our MRR, but I can't seem to get enough appointments. And so we're doing our best to solve that.
That's badass.
I'm jacked up for it. It'll be
Bro,
cool.
it's gonna be awesome. And for those MSP Camp listeners, I've worked out an exclusive deal that Steven will only offer at MSP Camp members. No, I'm kidding. Hopefully we get first dibs though. We'll see.
Absolutely, man. You know
And
that.
anything you need on if you're building the membership site and all that, like any way I can help, man, I'm so down to help in any way, because
I appreciate it.
I wholeheartedly 100% believe in what you're doing. I believe in you. You're the kind of person I want to. I mean, you've already succeeded, but you're the kind of person I really, really want to succeed, because the kind of person you're an authentic human that's just cool as fuck, and just a genuine friend. So I'm cheerleading for you, and I have resources to help you with wherever you want to go. So
I appreciate that, man. I'm just trying to follow in Big Bro's footsteps over there, trying to get it done. So I appreciate you having me, though, man. It was awesome chatting through a lot of this stuff today.
Agreed, man. I really appreciate you coming on. To the members and those listeners, really, really appreciate you listening. I hope you got some value today. And Steven, anything else before we wrap up?
I think we covered it, man.
Cool.
If we got more to go over, I guess you're just gonna have to get me back on here for round 2.
Sounds good to me.
I appreciate it, man.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you on the next one.